foster care system, and then specifically with Murray's House of Hope?
I am a foster care licensing assessor, where I license foster parents to take care of children that are in county agency custody. And at Marie's House of Hope, I am the foster care coordinator.
Perfect. So in this like doing research for this documentary, we've learned that there's a lot of different factors that cause children to enter into foster care. So from your experience, why do kids enter the foster care system?
Children can enter foster care for several reasons. The most obvious reasons is findings of physical abuse, physical neglect, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. There's so many reasons. Death of family members, so the state would consider that as a dependent child. So if a child doesn't have anyone to care for them, and there's no not mal, there's no there's no problem, there's not anything that's like someone has done. It's just there's no one to care for them. So it could be a grandparent that had custody of children and grandparents died, and those children are still under the age of 18, and no one else is willing to care for them. They would go into the foster care system.
In your experience, what's the most common reason, like out of all of those? What's the number one, number two?
Physical neglect. And physical neglect can be, of course, physically abandoning, but in my experience, it has been dirty homes. Whether there's no working utilities, no water, no food, those are the main things that I've seen in my experience.
Why did you get into this work?
At first, it was just because it was a job that was available. I originally wanted to be in a juvenile court detention vicinity, but a co-worker at a previous residential facility that I was working with said, hey, Children's Services is actually hiring. And I'm like, wow, okay, I'll apply for it. So I applied, got the job. I worked in a county agency for 17 years. So I've been in this field for, at least 30 years, working with children.
Yeah, and that's a public agency, right?
Correct.
And Murray's House of Hope is a private?
Yes.
Can you tell us the difference really quick of the public and private?
The Public Children's Service Agency, of course, is the custodian. And with so many children needing to be in foster care, private agencies fall in where basically being hired by a county agency to do the job that they would do. So with a Public Children's Service Agency, the worker needs to see the children in the home at least once a month. When they hire a private agency to do that, to take care of those kids are being seen more often, at least every 2 weeks or at least every week, depending on the contract.
Okay, nice, thank you. So what we're kind of curious to learn about is you deal a lot with like pairing foster parents to the children.
Correct.
So in your experience, what is it like when like someone gets a phone call that, someone makes the call that a child needs to be taken out of their home for whatever reason? Do you deal with that, and what is that like? Can you walk us through that process?
I have to give a little bit of the public information. A child comes into care. When a child comes into foster care or is granted custody to the county agency, that's only done by law enforcement, which is only like a 24-hour basis called shelter care, or a judge. Those are the only two. Like a social worker just can't go in a house and say, hey, we're going to take the kids. No, it has to be law enforcement or a judge to give that. So if that county doesn't have their own foster parents, that's when they contact the private agencies. So that's when they'll either send an email or they'll send a call. Hey, we have these 2 kids or just this one child. If there's someone they've been working with for a while, they'll know more of those children's behaviors. But a lot of times it's like, this just happened, we've never worked with this family before, and we don't know much about them. So a lot of times you're going in blind to make the placement, and at other times they might have some of those characteristics. And that way I match with my foster parents what characteristics of a child that they are willing to accept. So it can be, I'll take a child birth to 5. I'll take, some will only take a child 13 and up through 18. So it just depends. There's a child characteristics checklist that foster parents go through, and it has many behaviors on there if they're willing to accept them, whether it's fire setting, harmful to animals, many different behaviors, biting, wetting the bed, soiling themselves, and foster parents have the option to check that as a willing to or not willing to accept.
Yeah, you showed me that list. It was long, and there were so many details on it. Do you see, when you give that list to like prospective foster parents, do you see any sort of like discrimination in like who, how picky are foster parents?
In my personal experience, I think a lot of foster parents, not a lot, I've ran into several foster parents that are looking to adopt, and they see that as maybe a quicker way to get to that. But everyone that's a foster parent doesn't get that newborn. And most of those newborns could be drug exposed. It's not white picket fence or things. And getting that newborn, some of those behaviors might not start developing until 4 or 5 years old. So, I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
So do you see...
Discrimination.
Yeah, like
okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily a discrimination. I think foster parents are maybe thinking about their environment where they live, and this particular child, with maybe the race might be discriminated against in their community. So some might not choose that. But on the child characteristics checklist, every race, not every, but most that we see here in America are on there, and if they're willing to accept is an option.
How do you walk foster parents through that list?
Most foster parents are stating like, hey, it doesn't matter. They just want a child, and me talking to them like, okay, how do you think your neighbors would respond to a child that doesn't look like most of the kids in your neighborhood? Or do you have a relationship with these neighbors? Like, so would this child be going to that person's house, just to play, or, a party or anything like that? Would that child be accepted? So, just kind of walking them through, because everybody's like, oh, wow, we're going to get some kids. And it's a lot more to deal with. There's questions on the checklist. Are you willing to work with birth parents? Because any child that comes into foster care, the goal is that this is temporary and that the parents can work a case plan to reunify with their children. So if adoption is your route, this might not be the child for you. So a lot of talking, and everybody is different, but just trying to work through to get them to not be butterflies and bumblebees, just to make them see that, it's bigger than just a child coming in a home, because some of these children have experienced trauma. Some of these children, their household definitely culturally doesn't operate the way yours does. So there'll be a lot of differences, so we try to talk through those things to get a better idea or a better fit. And it's not always a great fit.
Thank you. That was great. That was a great answer.
Okay.
Okay, let's see here. What happened when that's not a good fit? Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. When you are talking to foster parents,
Mhm.
and they are like all excited and kids, we just want kids. Let's do this. And you kind of do tell them the reality of it. Then what happens?
There still some with the head in the clouds, and they're just eager and willing, and that's great. But that's my job as their worker, because I'm the worker for the children and the foster parents, as from being in the private agency. So I'm there as support. I'm there to help walk them through, connect them to resources that might be able to help that child. If it's a behavior problem, if it's a bedwetting problem, if it's the many things that go on. That's my job, to be able to help and support them. Now, if the child is placed and the behavior is like way not manageable, they can request a 2-week notice or 30-day notice, depending on the contract that you have with that agency. And children have been removed at the request of a foster parent many times.
Yeah.
So that's another placement, another change in that child's life. And I've experienced children who have had over 20 placements. So it's not like this is your forever home or this is your home that you're going to be in. It just doesn't always happen that way.
How does that impact that child who's been through 20 homes? Like, what does that do to kids?
The children I've experienced having multiple placements, they develop RAD, which is reactive attachment disorder. And those children typically have a honeymoon period, and sometimes when they feel that someone is trying to get close with them, they begin to escalate behaviors because they believe that it's not going to last. So to have control, they will mess up the placement before the belief that the foster parent will have them removed. So they'll do do some erratic behaviors just to get them to feel that they have the control of when I'm leaving. And that's more specifically to teenagers. The younger kids that are diagnosed with that, they still don't really realize what's going on. But if I'm the worker that's always working with them, it's repetitive. So
Is there any way, like, for those kids, like, how would a kid find a placement, with a disorder like that, where they struggle in that? Do you find that you move them around a lot, or do you really have to find the perfect foster parent for them?
They are moved around a lot, and sometimes that perfect foster placement for them is probably already full. So those beds are full. Mr. McDonald, who's also a foster parent, he was that foster parent that was always full because we know he can work with those children. So yeah, children are moved a lot, often, and it's unfortunate because foster parents come in with the belief and the hope that a child just needs love and they just need a warm bed and some blankets, and there are kids that will come into that sometimes beautiful home and will sleep on the floor because that's where they're more comfortable. So things aren't what's important to some kids. And there's been placements myself that it's like, oh, this is great. I know this will work, and it doesn't work out. So it depends on the commitment of the foster parent as a quote unquote no matter what, and just willing to work through it. And I think this probably more on the foster parents. And most foster parents have other children or their own biological children, and it starts affecting their children. So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place to say, okay, am I going to sacrifice my children and their behavior start because I'm so focused on these foster children that probably won't be in my home forever, but it's a lot of disruption. So there's a lot of things to consider, and those are a lot of things that are talked about with foster parents. But you can talk about it all day long in an interview or through a home study process, but it's nothing like the actual experience. And there's no script on how it's gonna go. So
that sounds pretty daunting.
Yes.
if I'm like looking to become a foster parent and I'm hearing all this, I'm like, oh man, I don't, that sounds like a hard task.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you do, I mean, part of your job is to tell the reality of it to prospective foster parents. So you tell them all about this, and then what do you say to a foster parent who's unsure about becoming, a foster parent, to motivate them?
Well, foster parents also go through several hours of training outside of just interviewing with me or going through a home study process. So they're learning about reactive attachment disorder, ADHD, bipolar, the bedwetting, the soiling, the smearing of feces on your walls, or different, like the most extreme things that child welfare has seen. So not only through me as the support person or just trying to explain in layman's terms, they have a lot of training that go through. Now, there have been some foster parents that have been through, once they get to that behavioral point, like, I don't think I can handle this. And that is fine. Just the thought that you wanted to open your home to a child is fantastic. And maybe there's some other ways you can, do something to be able to help them. I'm like, well, hey, you could still get a license because you might change your mind. And since once you're in the trainings, you've already went through half the process, more than half the process. So you can still be a licensed foster parent, and we'll still call you for placements, but you don't have to accept them. So we can say, hey, I've had a foster parents, oh, I'm leaving for vacation tomorrow, and I don't want to get the kid and then have to place them in respite after that. And respite is another foster parent who's like babysitting, but they're licensed and been through trainings and fingerprinted and all of those things. So some care that much to say, no, I got too much going on in my life right now, and I don't want to have to keep on putting a child in respite just to, have different caregivers.
Yeah. So can you just quickly walk through the process of becoming a foster parent?
Okay. Anyone that calls and is interested in being a foster parent, the first thing I'm going to send them is an application for child placement. So that application contains who's in your home, social security number, references, things like that. Once that's received, we can start getting all the which some foster parents call it intrusive documents. And in my letter, I informed them, like, this process may seem intrusive because we want last 2 mortgage statements or rent statements. We want insurance of the house. We want insurance of the car. We want insurance, like, do you have health insurance? Financial statements, because the financial statements are to be able to know that you can support yourself without foster care maintenance, because foster parents are paid to be able to take care of the child on a daily per diem. There's so much, and it's like, why do you need all of that? And it's like, because the state requires it. This is not something that we chose to do, but those are a lot of the requirements of the state, and it's extensive. They go through an FBI check, a BCI check, a National Child Sex Offender Registry check, and a SACWIS check, which is the state automated child welfare system that is used throughout the state for county and public and private agencies. And there's a background check in that. So there a lot of questions, a lot of information, bank statements. And they're like, what do you need my bank statements for? So a lot of, and that's probably the longest process because some people take a long time to get those things together. And so once that happens, we can set up trainings. And once they're completed their training hours, which is, let me see, they just switch it all the time. I believe it's 46 hours of training. Then I'll come to the home, do a safety audit, which is checking to make sure the locks on the doors are not on the outside, they're on the inside, that there's proper bedding when I come to the home. Not, oh, I'm gonna get a twin size bed or a crib. It has to already be in place. And that could be frustrating for some parents. It's like, I don't even know if I'm getting what kids I'm gonna have, so why would I have a crib already and if I don't know I'm getting a baby? But you have to be prepared because you can get a call at 3, 4, 1, 2 a.m. that a child has been removed and we need to be ready. So, so I do a safety audit, fire extinguishers, any playground equipment, just to make sure everything is safe. Carbon monoxide detectors, smoke detectors. If there are firearms in the house, I need to see the lockbox, that the ammunition is separate from that. So that's extensive as well. I'm coming through your house to see that all these things are safe. Then we'll go through, there's a lot of questions on a home study, you know. Tell me a time that was stressful for you and how did you handle it? So it kind of opens some scars. But it's also telling me why you want to be a foster parent. Those questions are like, well, I just want to save children because I was in foster care. Tell me about your foster care experience, because if you were in foster care and you were sexually abused and you didn't get any help for sexual abuse, and, you know, like, that's probably a red flag for me. I want to know more about that because I'm not saying that people that were sexually abused would abuse children, but, you know, just different views. So those extensive questions are a guide, but I can go dig deeper because I need to be able to explain in the home study how you handled a stressful situation, name a time that was difficult for you, or just it's very very extensive, and some people feel it's intrusive. I haven't had anyone stop on me and say, no, I'm not doing this, but I've heard of it being done.
Wow, that's pretty impressive that no one has been like,
Right, yeah, not
out
in,
here.
yeah.
Wow, so how many foster parents do you know, try and, you know, go through this process with, like, yearly?
For Marie's House of Hope, I've had 3 transfers from other foster care agencies. Maybe, you know, there wasn't great relationships with their previous agency, so they have the right to be able to transfer to an agency of their choice. They're already licensed, so that license comes with us. Currently, right now, I'm in the process of, like, going through the beginning stages with new foster parents. But they were foster parents previously, allowed their license to expire, but now they want to get back into it. So circumstances in their lives have changed, so now they have to go through the whole process all over again, but they're familiar with it because they were foster parents. I haven't had anyone yet to say, wow, because everyone I've been experienced with here at this agency has been a foster parent, currently or previously.
How long does that process take, if you were to do from beginning to end?
It depends on usually the foster parent. Getting those documents to me, because we're not going to start any trainings until we get the mortgage, the bank statements, all those paper documents and proof of those things. But if they get that to me fairly fast and they complete the trainings, I would say probably 3 to 6 months is probably the average. And that's also showing the dedication. Because if you're like, okay, these trainings are just too long, or I don't want to, like those trainings are important and giving a lot of important information on the children that we service and what your responsibilities would be and your rights.
So if there's, someone that does want to help foster care and they're like, I just don't have the time, I can't do 3 to 6 months, but I want to help. What are some other ways people can get involved to help?
They could probably look at services like the YMCA, not to help foster kids particularly, but if you're in the desire to help children, I mean, there are many community resources that have, I just, hopefully they do background checks, that anybody just can't come off the street to say, hey, I just want to work with kids. And I'm sure they do, those agencies do. But as far as foster care, we're very particular of who these children are. Like, the state is pushing a normalcy thing because it used to be foster kids couldn't stay the night at someone else's house unless they were another foster parent. So here's a pajama party, 12, 13-year-old girl. All my friends can go, or say there's a biological child in the house and both of you were invited, that foster care child could not go. So they were already kind of labeled or ostracized. So the state is pushing normalcy now, because normal parents, me as a parent, I'm not background checking people who my child goes over to their home. So trusting the foster parents' judgment on where they go. So, but they're very particular, background checks, and foster parents can choose an alternate care provider who will also be background checked, and that's somebody they can stay the night over, or if there's an emergency in the foster parents' home, whether it's hospital or sickness, that alternate care provider is already approved from the beginning to be able to provide services and safety for the child.
So, you would say then, like, the foster care system is now trying to, there was a time where there wasn't trust in, like, the parents, and now we're kind of moving towards, like, putting more trust into the foster care parents.
I don't know if it wasn't trust, it's just the liability. Because who's it going to come back on? It's going to come back on that county agency because that's either you hired or it's your actual foster homes, and XYZ happened. So I don't know if it's a lack of trust, it's just trying to make sure you're on top of it and not liable. I think that's probably more of it than not trusting the foster parents, because you've obviously trusted to put some children there. But there's just a lot of things that go on in communities these days that I have not imagined could happen, and they do. So understandable, but normalcy is a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Because I can't even imagine, like, a child, who just wants to go to that sleepover with, their friends, and
Yeah, or just go skating. Timmy's mom is picking us up. That was not allowed before. You would need the driver's license, you would need, they need to have a background check, or, like, there was no transportation, like just the normal things that parents do. Oh, well, carpooling, that was not, that wasn't allowed. From the football game, or it wasn't allowed. Normalcy helps make that possible for children.
And how do you think that affects a child? Like, if, all their friends can go somewhere, but they
Right.
can't?
Yes. Very, very disappointing. And And then sometimes you'll get those behaviors, well, why can't I go? And because, they're not going to understand because I'm not allowed to let you go or different things like that. So I'm glad that's being implemented and encouraged.
Okay. Yes. Yes, thank you. Okay, so, yeah, kind of going off of that, kids are young and they're still trying to figure out, they are trying to figure out their friends. They're trying to figure out who they are as a person.
Yes.
So do you see, like, kids in foster care struggling with their sense of identity? Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yes. I think that's any child, definitely during preteen age and things that you're trying to just figure out yourself. There are struggles with, if I'm still in the same, which I think is great, to be in the same community that I was removed from, because at least my connections and resources or people that I felt safe with are still present. But you're also going to school with possible relatives, and this is my cousin, or this, or this is my friend from my neighborhood, or different things like that, and you might not be able to go to that neighborhood or anything, or to that house, because if it was physical abuse or concerns about your family. And it's like, why can't I go? Or just the struggle of why can't I go home? So, yeah, they're trying to find their identity, but also there's restrictions on them, which all kids should have some restrictions. But theirs are like restrictions on just sometimes just my family members. Like, you can't go be alone with your dad. It has to be a supervised visit at a specified location, but it's my dad, or mom, or brother, sister. There's just so many crazy, unfortunate things that happen to children nowadays, and every situation is different.
Is there like a distinct, like, kids in foster care tend to like behave more like this way versus like kids not in foster care that you see in your personal experience?
When speaking, I'm going to speak of some of the current kids we have in placement now. They're doing some of the same behaviors that they were doing with in their family origin, but the children were actually with a grandmother. And the grandmother reports these are the same behaviors, but that's also a child. Even though they're with a grandma, they're still not with mom and dad. So there's just different behaviors for different situations. I have had a foster child who was a straight A student. I wish I knew where she was right now, and I think she's probably a doctor or something, or on her way, but I think that was her way of controlling what was going to happen in her life, is I'm going to be successful where I don't have to depend on anybody else, and the only person I can depend on is me, and the only way to make sure I get this done is to be successful in school. Didn't have many social relationships or friendships and things like that. I hope that has changed for her, but understandably, that was her way of fighting all the things that were going on in her life, and she didn't have any choice in the decisions besides her grades.
So it's not always, I think there's this kind of mentality, or this, I don't know, people just kind of assume, kids in foster care, they must act out,
Mm-hmm.
they must, but it's like.
Not all. I mean, of course my child tries me all the time. My child will bully, I call her a bully, but she'll try to, like, she's a child, like, I'm gonna keep on asking, I'm gonna keep on doing this, and there's always some defiance, or at least trying. So I think foster kids, it's just the trauma. It's the trauma. Foster children have been through trauma, And whether it's a death, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's lack of basic needs being provided for them, those are traumatic events. So you'll have a kid that hoards or sneaking food, different things like that, because they're not comfortable knowing that it will be there. So every child is different, and every child reacts. There's some kids that's like, wow, I love it here. I'm safe. I love my mom and dad, but I don't want to go back. But they have to go back sometimes if the parents did what they were supposed to do. So it's not always just severe behavior problems and medications and things like that, but it's common.
Thank you. Perfect. Covered that. So, kind of transitioning a little bit, going back to foster parents really quick. I know you kind of talked about this, but how many foster parents do you have like ready right now to take a child?
2.
Can you say like I have 2 foster parents ready to take a child right now?
2. Yes.
Okay. Nice. And then how does that compare to the amount of calls you get, the amount of kids you have calling?
We receive emails at probably a minimum of 8 to 10 just from one particular county every day, Montgomery County. We also receive from Franklin County, not as often because they're trying to look into their area at first. But Montgomery County, we probably get 10 to 12 emails. So that's probably an average of 10 to 15 kids that need a placement
A day?
a day.
These are like different kids every single day?
Yes.
And you have 2 foster families ready?
Yes. And one of those foster families already has 4.
What do you do? What do you do in that situation?
We look, when the emails are sent, it'll say, first of all, male or female, age. It's mainly a lot of teenagers. And the foster parents that I currently have are not willing to take a child that old because they have young ones in the house, or just the behaviors that come with teenagers. And in their characteristics sheet, they checked that they didn't want kids that age. But if I look at the ICA, which is the Individual Child Care Agreement, I'll say, hey, this kid hasn't had any behavior problems. They've been working with them for a while. Just the parents were, like, would you be willing? So I'll still call and ask. And they can say yes, even if it's not on their characteristics list. So that's my job to know my parents, to like, hey, they might take this. I might be able to talk them into this one. So that individual child care agreement is key to the initial stage, but at the same time, if it's the county's first time ever working with this family and don't have any history on them, there's a lot of unknowns, and that's concerning, especially if there's other kids there.
Yeah. What happens to those kids in your emails?
Most of the time, most of them are filled by another private agency that has the availability. There are a lot of networks within this Miami Valley. I have known of some that have had to stay in their county agency's lobby overnight, not because some agencies in the Miami Valley are 24-hour agencies. But yeah, they usually find somewhere, or they end up in a group home, which is the next level of care above foster care.
Yeah, could you talk about what a group home is really quick?
A group home is a home setting that has children and staff. It's to be more like a home, but there's different staff and shifts, so it's not mom and dad. It's staff members that are caring for me. Still in a home setting, still, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's still in a home setting. It's just more restrictive and less personal, less homey, even though you're in a home. But there's no mom and dad figure. It's people, staff members that are caring for you.
What is it like for someone to live in a group home from your experience?
Some children do well. Some children are the same behavior. You know, I'm separated from my family. I'm at a new school. Same thing. It affects group home kids the same way it affects foster kids. And now you're dealing with a whole bunch of kids in your age group that are probably have the same behaviors as you. So there's a lot more tension in the home and trying to control certain behaviors as a staff member, or trying to just, I can't think of how I want to say that. It's different, but better than the next restrictive environment, which is a residential center. You know, so I'm lost. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
So foster care home, group home, residential care center.
Correct.
What's a residential care center?
A residential care center is a facility. Usually they're locked facilities where the kids can't get out. They have a bedroom. There's usually a psychiatrist on staff there, and there's just staff members that are caring for them. So it's a facility. It's nothing like a foster home. And yeah, staff members, not a family. It's not a family atmosphere.
And kids don't really get the choice on where they get to go?
Absolutely not. Never get the choice on where they get to go.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then age outs, do you deal with age outs at all? Do you see that?
I've had 2 age outs in my lifetime as a public agency, a worker. There were, I think he had 5 adoptive placements. The first one was at 5 years old. He had been in foster care since he had been age 2. That foster family had him. He was in the adoptive placement, no longer foster care. Like, this is adoptive placement now, and his behaviors, they couldn't do it. So he went back into foster care. He had maybe 3 to 4 more adoptive placements, and the behaviors increased after the adoptive placement, and he was returned into foster care. The last one, he was 16, went into adoptive placement with the family up north that knew him from school because he was placed in the northern Ohio area. They knew him from school and like, wow, he is such a nice young man. Why is he in foster care? They got licensed to be a foster parent for him with the goal of adoption. They went to out of state to celebrate for that, you know, just as like a family vacation, and his behaviors were so extreme in the other state that they traveled to, they were scared to fly back home with him. So from that state, he went back to the residential facility that he was in prior to going to their home. There were actually 2 families that met him through the residential center or the school that he was attending that wanted to adopt him. That time, he actually got to have a choice. And he chose them, and it didn't work. But the other family that remained in his life, once he was 18, he decided, he let them adopt him after he was 18 years old. So he actually had a family. he's deceased. He was in a car accident last year, and but I'm glad that he had his quote unquote forever family. But he 18 to 20 placements in his lifetime, and that hurts because sometimes as a worker you feel like a failure at times, or like this is gonna work, but it didn't. So it affects a lot of people. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just want to, it's very emotional for you.
Yeah.
For you, what is it like going through all these, you build relationships?
You build the relationships with some kids for a long time, and of course, as a parent myself, you get that thing like, oh gosh, I wish I could just take them home with me. But I know that would affect my children, so that's not going to be able to happen. But you see beautiful stories like that on national news. A social worker who actually quit her job because she couldn't be his foster parent working at the same agency to get a child. And those are the great stories. I hear there's a movie out about some foster placement, a family who were did foster care. I think it's in the state of Texas, and they inspired their whole neighborhood and church to foster children or whatever, and it became a movie. I can't remember. I haven't seen it yet, but I know they show some of that movie for our training for new employees, just because it shows the behaviors that children go through and experience. So yes, it can be very disheartening, and what's the word I want to use? The unknown. Because once a kid leaves from Marie's House of Hope, or they, whether it's an age out or they were reunified with their parents, sometimes you don't know what's going on with them, how they're doing. I hope that next foster home they were at worked out. But it's like okay, they're gone, they're done. And it's kind of weird for a grown-up to be still calling some kids and like, how are they doing? So there's a lot of unknowns from a worker perspective, and hope that it worked out. And some of those kids, once they get older, they find you. Now, I'm a recent social media person. They find you. So another kid that I had that aged out, he actually used to be placed at a group home here. I had placed him and before I had worked here, and he invited me to his wedding. And I was like, I don't care what's going on in my life, I need to be at that wedding. And I was so happy to be there. And there was no other people there for him, like none of his biological family or anything. So just to think of me, because our relationships with especially teens are not fantastic. I've been called many names. I've been attempted to be assaulted. I have, many, many, many names. And it's like, wow, you want me at your wedding? So I have no problem with going. I've been threatened. I've been, I can protect myself really well, and I have different trainings to be able to restrain. But yeah, I've been threatened. I've been cussed out. I've been called many, many names. But I don't take it personal. Now, if it was somewhere else or just a regular person, I would be offended. But when it comes from a kid who's been experienced trauma and all the other things, I don't take it personal. And most of those kids, when they're adults, they're looking for me, or if they run into me, they're coming up to see me to say, hey, Miss Monique. And it's like, wow, like, okay, like, you actually like me. Or they might just realize over experience in their life, like, this person or that person actually was trying to help me, but they couldn't grasp it at the time. So you'll see sometimes the fruit of your labor many years later.
And like that's so cool. And how important is that, you know, to you, to just like anyone helping foster kids, that, you know, it may be hard and you may be cussed out and you may, you know, but for someone to come to you in the future and be like,
It makes me know that what I chose, even though I came into foster care as a job or child welfare as a job, I stay because it's important and it's missing for a lot of kids, and what I do doesn't go in vain.
and I know so many kids, obviously, like, they so appreciate it and the work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful. Okay, to kind of wrap it up, for all those foster children out there that are looking for hope and love, what would you say to them?
It exists. Hope and love exists. There are people that might not be foster parents that can still be an inspiration, a guide, a stable person in their lives. I would encourage anyone who's considering foster care to look more into it, because it might not be as bad as you think, and it might not, it might be something that's your calling and would be very beneficial to you, your family, and the children that you would serve.
Wonderful. Anything else you guys think?
I was wondering if you could tell Sophie the story about these windows. And also, I got tissues for you if you need it.
Oh, was I given permission to talk about the window?
Yeah, if you can, that's fine.
I don't know.
We mentioned it on our way in, and so
Oh,
I figured.
I think Mr. Craig would be better to be able
Okay.
to speak about that.
Okay, I'll ask him.
Oh, trying experience. Very trying. Yeah, it's like, great. Maybe if you do any video of the building, go on this side.
Yeah. Okay, got it. We will. All right, yeah, I'll ask Craig about that.
Okay.
Yeah, if you guys don't have any other questions, sweet.